everyone. We're here for the State Board of Education's College Partnership Laboratory Schools Standing Committee. I'm glad we don't have to put that on a business card. And to discuss the draft process that has been presented to the Standing Committee for your consideration. We are going to do a call to order and just identify who is here from the Standing Committee, both physically present in the room to do a quorum check, and who may be participating online. So do we want to just start with you?
Bill Hanson.
Bill Hanson.
Andy Rotherham.
John Widiska.
And online, Pamela.
Pam Moran.
Pam Moran. So as a body of 7, meeting 4 of the body president of the room, we don't have quorum. But you can continue with the meeting and have a presentation and ask questions. You just can't make any deliberative decisions. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. All right, super. So we have before us 2 general documents to consider. The large document is the draft process. The State Board office has, with the help of the superintendent, temporarily hired in a wage capacity a facilitator for the Standing Committee while we're in a hiring process to replace the board director. And I think that will work for you all. Unfortunately, she doesn't happen to be available today. And so for the camera, I'm Elizabeth Schultz. I'm the Assistant State Superintendent. So I am stepping in not only to provide technical assistance on lab schools, but also to guide you through the draft process document that has been created to help you review, form a recommendation, and submit a report to the Board of Education on any submitted lab school applications, not just the 2 that are currently in receipt, that we're in receipt of. Some of the information at the beginning of this document are things put in here for posterity's sake, in the event that anybody else, cycles in or off. So we go through and have the background, the college laboratory school fund, which you all know about, and the definition of a lab school. If we could move forward on my slide, the most significant thing I just want to start with is what the general process is. It's kind of basic. You're in the middle of the sausage making of a lab school application. We've got the 6 steps here. Just generically, without any detail, you receive a lab school application that has been submitted to the department, that staff from the department and or I review to ensure that it's just generally complete, that it's not missing anything fundamental. We're not reviewing it for a recommendation purpose, but we're just making sure it's complete. The Standing Committee reviews the lab school application. You meet by the process document that was previously established by the board with the applicant. You allow for a public comment period or hold a public hearing. That is not prescribed in detail in the process document. You develop and provide a written set of recommendations, a written report to the full board that it will use to consider for approval. And you provide not only the written copy of the report to the board, but you provide it to the applicant. Okay, if we could go forward. The focus of the review process for the Standing Committee is on the Section B part of the application process document. Now, that has a little bit of a misnomer, and I may jump ahead just a little bit. You all will see those of you who are on the board will see a presentation tomorrow where I'm bringing the old 2010/2011 process document. I'm modernizing it aligning it to the planning grant guidelines and the startup and per pupil funding guidelines. So it is gonna look the same when we're finished, it's gonna feel the same, it's gonna clear up some things, and we're just gonna call them the guidelines for a lab school application process. So the middle section of that what's a process document right now is you receiving and reviewing, meeting with the applicant, requesting advisory working or technical assistance from the department, conducting the public hearing, and developing the recommendation and report to the board. So now I want to go, if you can flip to the next page, now we are into the elements of the lab school recommendation document itself. The first 2 pages here are what the Virginia Code says. This is what, why a lab school may be established on slide 7. And then on the next slide, unfortunately, there are 31 statutory essential elements that the Virginia General Assembly previously has built into the code. Whether that will ever be streamlined, I don't know, but that's what we have to deal with right now. And how those 31 elements have been translated, go to the next slide, please, as elements in the lab school application process itself, they're put sort of into buckets, into 8 buckets that appear within the application that the applicant is asked to respond to. And it's 8 plus, I call it the 8+1, because it's not just the 8 that are statutory. So those are summarized, executive summary, mission and vision, educational program, the next page, governance, management structure, financial operations, placement plan, and other assurances. Those all 31 that appear in the process document, that appear in code, are folded under one of those 8 elements as a part of the application process. And if you flip over, my +1 is the public comment period. The public comment period is not required by statute, but it is required by the way the board originally approved the process. And that's understandable and natural that the board would want to allow the public to weigh in on any lab school application. So let's go to the structure of the report. So this is really where, since we've last met in December, this is where the work of the department has come alongside to sort of give you some technical guardrails in how the committee may want to, and I emphasize may because this is still your process, but we're trying to give you the process by which you can go ahead and evaluate. If you have the document itself, if you can turn to page 4, it says a structure is provided to assist the standing committee in developing its report to the board. And we're like, okay, how do you, as a committee, as individual committee members, look at an application, understand that there's some statutory things, check marks that you're going to need to meet, and then assess, because every applicant is going to be very different in their approach. The nature of the lab school, the students it serves, where it serves, all of it's going to be very different. But you're going to have to answer some basic questions. So what we did is we said, okay, there's going to be some focus questions. You're going to have an opportunity to look for evidence as you're going through the focus questions that will allow you, with this rubric rating that's at the bottom, and you have 3 choices on each of these elements, if you will, or portions of the elements. Is it evident that the I think you can slip forward a couple. Yeah. Is it evident that they have produced this information in the application? Is it emerging, or is there partial detail but not all of your questions are answered? Or do you see that they have fully responded, that it's operational, or that they're ready to implement? And then there will be a closing overall assessment for each of the areas. And then at the end of your process, you will be able to do whatever assessment you want of the public comment period. And I'm not ready for that yet. So I have just as a small exercise, if people would turn to 4, which is governance, the element of governance. So you have an impact statement here that says, and this is just an example, all of these are going to work the same, but the school provides governance and leadership that promotes student performance and school effectiveness. That's a reasonable standard that you should be able to say, can you read the application and determine that they have set up a governance structure that meets this standard? And then the impact statement goes a little bit further into the questions that are asked for those elements. A school is successful in meeting the standard when its leaders who are advocates for the school's vision, and improvement efforts. When it has leaders. The leaders provide direction, allocate resources to implement curricular and co-curricular programs that enable students to achieve expectations for their learning. Leaders encourage collaboration and shared responsibility for school improvement among stakeholders. The school's policies, procedures, and organizational conditions ensure equity of learning opportunities and support for innovation. If you flip over, then there's a couple of focus questions that allow you, as you're reading that section of an applicant's information. What is the process that they describe for establishing, communicating, and implementing the policies and procedures for the effective operation of school? What process will the school's leadership use to evaluate school effectiveness and student performance? In what ways will stakeholders, including staff, be given opportunities to provide leadership and to contribute to the decision-making process? And what policies and processes are in place to ensure equity of learning opportunities? So it just breaks it down for you. These are not check marks that you have to say they do this, but this allows you, as you're reading it, to think, okay, am I reading what I think I'm reading? The real rubric measure comes in when you take that rubric rating of the not evident, emerging or partial, and operational or ready to implement on the elements that appear in the evidence section, and you would apply on the left-hand side in one of those rubric ratings, and then on the right, you would add in comments. And you can do this online. You can all do this you can type online. This is what the part of the process we'll talk in a little bit about how you figure it out. But each of these would get a rating from each of you on how you do, or you decide as a body together to give it one set of ratings. So is the background information on the proposed founding governing board, and if identified the proposed leadership school and leadership management team there. And then if you think, okay, well, look, they described generically, but they didn't provide enough detail. And you can go through each one of these, and then you're going to be fulfilling the 31 statutory requirements. And then you have an overall assessment if there's an overarching theme or something that you see for one of these buckets, one of these 8 element buckets. And then as you flip through, each of these is the same for those 8 elements, but you're going to have different metric indicators because each one of these is going to be unique to the statutory requirements. You go all the way to the end, page 24 in this draft document. You'll see that there were a couple of concluding questions that the board can use, or the standing committee can use to sort of synthesize, overarching themes or what you feel needs to be expressed that you didn't have the opportunity to express by just giving a rubric rating on one of the indicators. Things like, is there specific feedback that we offer to ensure the applicant can successfully launch? What are major trends or themes? You have the public opportunity to do the public comment assessment, which is outside the statutory guidelines. And then what are the proposed lab school's greatest strengths and greatest challenges? And that may help the board make some determination about, does it need to ask any more questions of the applicant at the board meeting at which they're entertaining it? And then finally, there's just some general operating instructions here for you guys. Significantly, that number one is the organization. You all may decide to have a leadership structure within the standing committee. There's nothing that requires it or prohibits it in the process document. It tells you a little bit about each of those components of how you meet, receive applications, public comment, technical assistance, meeting with the applicant, the development report, and the board review. And then obviously, the determination of an award of a lab school launch doesn't rest with this body, but rests with the body as a whole. Can you advance to the draft calendar? This is, it's not perfect. It's difficult to see, but
Is this the same version you sent us?
it is. So I reverse engineered this calendar because it's very important to see how long, actually, we're gonna go backwards to this. Can we go one slide ahead? There should be two, yeah, this one. No, the next one. So if you start with the end in mind, which is when does the board meet? You have to work backwards, and it seems like it's a long time, but the department's board agenda item submission deadline is February 28th, for example, for the March 22nd meeting. It seems like, oh, that's almost a month in advance, but it takes the board time to produce the board book, have internal meetings, determine what other additional information the board may need. So there is a very long lead up to any board meeting itself. So you cannot say, oh, well, the meeting's on March 22nd, we'll meet, 10 days prior and produce the report. It just doesn't work that way. So can you go backwards one slide? So with this in mind, I did a for example. So the first one is set. Wednesday, February 1st, the standing committee is meeting. Jim and the board office can put up public comment on the two, for example, two applications that have been received. If you had.
Do you want questions now, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
I just have a legal question. Can we close public comment on a Saturday?
These public comment forms, they let us
We can do
close
it.
them whenever we want.
So that's a fine day, okay.
So
That just come,
I will just comment on that. The way that, I would advise the members of the committee would be that we count this as business days. I know that there's one close on a Saturday. I saw there was one meeting on a holiday. I think these are minor administrative items that we can tidy up. But
this calendar can be worked any way you want.
Exactly.
I built this.
this is super helpful.
I built in formulas,
I
but
love it.
that's why I have the number of calendar days and I have the number of work days. And that's for the public comment as well as for the committee itself.
So Elizabeth, one of
Yes.
the things that I think I'd love to see on this, just as you've built out an amazing schedule to kind of forecast, like what's the drop dead deadline for an item to go before the board. I think we have to have that front end for us, so that documents are coming to us, so that we have advance notice, that the public has advance notice, that they can comment on them, so that we have the benefit of having public comment versus the public comment coming after we deliberate. So this column on standing committee, closed to public comment, for example, I think that
Your deliberation is happening in the 10 plus the 18 days. So you have the report period after public comment.
but we're not meeting again, is my comment.
That's correct.
Correct. So we need to kind of reconfigure, just as you have a process for the board, there has to be a process. I'm gonna say this to the board members or the committee members, right? I think we have to have a process, because otherwise it puts too much burden now on staff to interpret public feedback, and we don't have an opportunity to act on it. So I think it's gonna add a little bit of time, but it's really important to have a good process that everyone can buy into. If you have a good process, we're gonna have a better outcome. And right now, we just, we're gonna need I think the first time the state board, I would feel comfortable giving something to the state board is actually probably now gonna be almost like the April meeting. Because we have to back into opportunity, if we're going with this calendar, you have to have opportunity for example, this body to get public feedback even on the process document that's been placed before us today.
This is yours.
And I'm saying
Yeah.
that that's really important to me because this is ours, but how we make this ours and how we make it
Mhm.
work for the public is I have to have an opportunity to comment on this. Because, and the board, gentlemen, you're the board members here. I mean, if I was a board member still, I would want this on your agenda. I would want your input on it because we are here on your bequest. And so if you take this up at your meeting this month, you preview it, you discuss it, how you see this should be run. We are merely, as I am just kind of in a lay look at this, I'm merely a judge looking at a rubric that's been set out of the parameters and saying yay or nay or giving some technical assistance. But this is ultimately your process. So I think bringing this before the board, having them have some input on this, having the public have some input on it, then we can fairly adjudicate based on the parameters. But it's not, with the absence of public feedback, we don't even know what the public thinks about that process, nor do we know what the board thinks about the process.
Well, we're gonna find out the board shortly. We're gonna find out what the board,
Yeah,
we'll discuss this tomorrow. I don't know that we need to push to April, but I think your point is extremely well taken on making sure on process. I mean, I think we have around the Commonwealth, we have, you can kind of pluck it, we have some people who are very excited about the opportunity to create more options for kids and families and are enthusiastic about this. I think you have a bunch of people who are like skeptical, if not completely hostile to that idea. And then you've got a wide swath who just don't know what we're doing, what any of this is about. I think that group that doesn't have their mind made up already is the audience we need to make sure has confidence in the process, has confidence that there's, input and transparency and all that.
So I am
We know what we're
doing,
doing.
I am doing, tomorrow, I am doing a lab school presentation to the board.
Right.
Not for action, but just to apprise them. This is going to be a part of it. But the delegation that the board has done is allowing us to help facilitate the standing committee. So I don't know how much the board wants to go back into the cycle after doing the delegating.
Correct.
And so I think it's incumbent upon us, which is why we put it on as a presentation item for tomorrow, just to apprise the board. This is what the lab school application process document looks like. This is why we're cleaning it up. We're gonna update what we have on the map. We're gonna have an interactive map on the lab schools page to give the status more publicly facing for everyone. I'm gonna show them this document. So I think they're in the loop in terms of being apprised. It's just a question of, do you all want another action item on this?
I would like one, and I'm also gonna say, I think it would be very helpful. I think one of the documents you had asked for at the last meeting was also, I think you used the word kind of a flow of what are the deadlines for applicants? What might an applicant expect? That's part of this, right? But I think right now, it just really tactical on this spreadsheet. The column I'm hoping to add is the date by which items need to be sent to this committee. That those, let's say those materials are sent to this committee X number of days prior to a meeting, that those materials are made public, and there's an agenda. And I think if we add that kind of column in, we now allow for public comments, we allow these committee members to deliberate so that when we do convene, say come March 6th, that we have all our ducks in a row.
And I think I was going to mention that just the cadence of the flow of the workload of the number of schools, kind of how we see the pipeline coming through the course of these meetings, if we're going to be evaluating 3, 2, 5, 7 type of thing. I'm still a little not even knowing what the inflow is going to be and then what the management is going to be required of us, and just and I agree with you on the time for the public comment, but I just kind of to that point too. I really, with the presentation tomorrow, what's going to be on the docket for the board, the March meeting, the April meeting, from a substantive standpoint.
Right. So, so this is my, you can always give away land you own philosophy. That, I must credit my husband, very famous American. You don't have to have all these meetings. But by placing them on the calendar and placing a hold, what that says is, should a lab school application come in, it's a rolling application process. There are no dates, because an IHE and its partners and its school division, if it's partnering with the local school division, they will, reach the denouement of their application process when they do. So by having this as a known schedule, they could adjust their cadence to say, hey, if I want my lab school application considered for the April meeting, it's probably a pretty good idea that I understand when this body may meet. And we can certainly, we could even, as soon as we get the application, we could add into the process. Once we turn it over to you, we could just start the public comment period then. We could just initiate the public comment period. I think for this first one, we're off cadence because it's the first one. You're just now, getting up and running. So I would strongly recommend that even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, that you drive those first 2 applications for the March meeting, because they've been in for a while. And yes, it took us up and running, but they're ready to go and they're ready to be evaluated.
And if
So
they've gotten feedback, we can parking lot that if that's.
I have
We should
apprised
be-
them,
okay.
but I also apprised them of this schedule that's been given to you all as a draft.
Okay.
And I've said everything was dependent upon the body itself, but that this is what I would anticipate.
Okay.
So they are aware.
Joan, to your question, I think the board bylaws still require 7 days, for preparation and provision of materials to the board. Would you all be comfortable with that, or would you like a longer number?
That's consistent with the
That's
board.
consistent.
And I think thank you. That's exactly. And so if we just kind of the box of the board, deadlines for materials.
Yeah.
We just put that on the front end for this.
Yeah.
And it's a mirror image.
Yeah.
So the same thing the board does, the standing committee does on behalf of the board.
Great. So when we set these dates, then we'll just have the 7 days before, and we'll try to make sure you have an extra weekend.
7 business days.
I think the board does.
Do they do calendar days?
We'll do our best.
Okay.
I think I hear your point, but that should just be in compliance. I prefer business days, but if the board does calendar days, we should do calendar days, just so people aren't confused
That's
about these processes.
Your presentation tomorrow is going to reference the 2 that are already in the pipeline and prepare the board for the March meeting. So, okay.
Jim works every day, by the way, so he doesn't understand. What's not a business day?
It doesn't compute.
Just also, with one of these dates being on Labor Day and 2 that I know that I'm out of town for, does it matter? I'm just hoping that between the 7 of us.
I was looking forward to spending my Labor Day with you.
And again, this was a plug and play. You'll see on the calendar that I distributed to you in the lower left, it's got the holidays. So that's why the period of work days is, changes. Any one of these can change.
I think it would be helpful just to quickly make sure we're gonna be able to have quorums and make sure the board members of this committee members appreciate the expectation. And then Also to figure out locations, collect a plan. I felt like that George, just given the geography of a lot of folks, that George Mason location was excellent. If we could just have that space on a regular basis, was good facilities, easy for people if they want to come and participate. And
Megan, I don't know if you have access to that information from the original orientation.
Maddie gave me.
Yeah, okay.
it seems like just given the composition of the committee and where people either live or are for work frequently or whatever, that we will be able to
And-
get to a
And
quorum.
I have gotten a read, and it may not be perfect, but if Lorraine is facilitating your meetings, she actually doesn't have to be physically present with you. She could attend by Zoom if you all are all physically present.
Sure, if we can
with the
also, I mean, I
quorum.
don't know, Madison has a lot on her plate, and so she would, we
Yeah,
can do that stuff virtually, as long as we have 4 board members, and I think that location gives us our best.
yeah, we've done the
sure.
handoff from
Yeah.
the secretary's office to the department, because the board office should really be doing that.
Great.
So that's why we got Lorraine
Yeah.
for you all, and she has a background in, she's actually an attorney.
What's your last
She has
name?
a Vanessa. You should have gotten, I think at least one email from her. And she has a background in facilitating group work too.
And I do just want to point out for the record, even though we're not taking any votes or anything, Joan's heroic efforts to get to Richmond.
I
Here in
do.
person,
I do,
yeah,
I do.
like she and her husband, like heroes to be here.
Well,
It's very, it is
Particularly
extremely appreciated.
extremely appreciative of her husband. Who was a driver.
Who had no choice in that, but we still appreciate it.
Yes, Pam.
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
it's Maddie. I'm so sorry to interrupt. John Bailey is trying to get on the Teams meeting, which is what was sent around on the calendar invite. So Megan, I don't know if you want to call him. Oh, never mind. He just got on the Zoom. Disregard.
He's figured it out? Okay. All right, that's terrific. All right, Pam, do you have any comments to weigh in?
There are a couple things that I just wanted to weigh in on is that I do think that public tends to think about public comment through a business day model versus just a straight run of the calendar model. So just to think about that, that may be something just to think about in terms of how we set that public comment calendar. But the other piece that I really want to comment on about getting the meetings set and publicized is that for school divisions, obviously, they are trying to hit the mark in terms of their gates for knowing that a program like this is going to get approved and be able to be in that startup mode to be ready to go at the point where they're planning to do an opening, whether it's at the beginning of the year, and in some cases, people may decide to open later in the year than that. It could be a mid-year opening, but really just trying to make sure that what we're building gives schools adequate time if they're thinking that they're going to open. I think that a June 5th or a July 31 meeting, that we just need to caution folks that if it gets approved on that date, that they've got to be really ready to make their start and to make sure that we know that where they are in that process.
Hi, John.
Right, so that's really why I think it's important that you all decide, which you can't decide, but you can decide at your next meeting, but you can give guidance to us in helping build your calendar. You can set your calendar regardless and make an official vote at a subsequent meeting. But if you would like to post this as a draft calendar, and you could give us guidance, oh, we really want that second column that says public comment work days. We want that to be, 7 work days. We want it to be 10. We want it to be 2 weeks, whatever it is that you want. It gets published at Town Hall and it will be put as a notice on the board section of the website. So those will both be out, and it's just how much time. And we can buy back time that will not change your meeting dates by just saying, as soon as, if you want us to, as soon as we turn over a lab school application to you all, I don't know the time between when that happens and when you'll next meet, but we could open the public comment period right away. I just suggest that you have a standard comment period. That it not be 3 weeks for one and a month for another one and 10 days for another one, that it just be, you just sort of adopt, just like you were saying for, hey, 7 calendar days, we know that we're gonna get before a meeting, we know we'll have the agenda and we'll have any applications to consider at that time. And then whichever IHE with whom we need to meet.
So for the sake of your sanity and efficiency. And Pam, I really appreciate your remark also on the September date and the October date, and almost just having, what I heard through your comment was even maybe having a meeting in September, October could almost be confusing to a potential applicant because they can't open school per se for the fall of 2023. So might we have almost a no meeting September, October, and then kind of open for business again, say November of 2023, which would be for applications for the fall of 2024 kind of thing. So just kind of something to, I think all of us to think about. And Pam, it's a really great insight. The flow, if I'm an applicant, what you're also really saying is if I'm an applicant and I put my document in, what's the date by which, and this is really a gem for, what's the date by which I must file that with this standing committee so that there can be action taken? And what's the expectation for a timeline for review? Which is really also getting to like
So,
Bill's question.
A couple of things there. One, you could have a school that is ready to open mid-year. I mean, they could get wind of this and they could have a turnkey facility ready and they said, look, we're ready to start with a pilot of, say we're gonna do 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Great.
And we have a group of 6th graders that we've identified. We're ready to start them in the spring. Or it could be, look, we have a heavy lift, we have a big endeavor that we're planning for the success of fall, and we need as much runway as possible. I wouldn't short anyone the opportunity on a rolling basis.
I would just say that I think just August is always a dead month no matter what, so
Typically,
maybe
safe word doesn't make
maybe
sense.
just killing the September meeting and having a November meeting.
So I have I didn't actually have you meeting in August.
No, I know that, but I'm saying July 31 to September 4th, that 30-day window is gonna be dead time at most
Okay.
places, so
Yeah.
if we killed the September meeting and
Yeah.
included a November meeting, I think it would kind of
Well,
from a flow. But
I
know
don't-
there's a lot
I
of
don't-
board meetings.
okay, so do
We
you
can
all
just take this
have,
back.
do you all have a November board meeting? I don't,
We do, it's second, I'd have to check the second and third. Before, obviously, I think it's the week
15th and
before the
16th.
holiday, yeah.
the 15th and 16th. Okay, oh, yes, so those, we haven't clicked forward. Can we click forward to the next calendar? Because I think this calendar is built out, yes.
Right.
So it is, the October meeting is built out to the November, but we could plan a November one in anticipation of your January.
That'd be good.
Well then.
Okay,
So what I was gonna I'm gonna volunteer myself to work with Elizabeth, yourself, and Jim and Megan to gather input from the committee members and then work with you to fine tune this excellent draft working calendar. It's the first time I've seen kind of it's great. I'm so happy to see this because you're really kind of laying out, hey, here's the process, here's the timeline, here's what it's gonna look like. But why don't we, John, if you have any specific thoughts on this that you'd like to verbally share, or if not, since everyone is kind of maybe get a chance to look at this, really think about it. And I don't know, Megan, if there's a way for all of us to group comments together. And then, I can see that. So if, Andy or Bill or John have additional thoughts, you can send it in an email to me or to everyone to see. Probably that's the best. And then I can work with the staff team to give you kind of 2.0 on this, if that's comfortable, and then we can move on to the next item on the agenda?
Can I ask you a question?
Is that-
Are they, on the contemporaneous meeting, if there's a shared document, are they allowed to put comments into a shared document as long as they don't do it contemporaneously?
Never thought about that before. Normally staff would collect comments individually from each member and then do a compilation.
Which is preferred for me.
I think so, yeah.
So what you can, what you can each do is, you have the standard process document in draft. You could literally just load, on a track changes, you could load your comments and send the document to Joan. And then Joan, the staff can help you, compile them,
I'll help them.
Well,
Yeah, but yeah.
Lorraine, I'm guessing Lorraine will be.
Yeah, Lorraine,
on that process, right?
Lorraine is gonna facilitate changes, So if everybody just wants to comment on the Word document and send those in, and on the calendar as well, but I've heard that really this September meeting is not, any meeting in September is not optimal, but that we could add a November meeting in anticipation of January. And then also build in the 7 days. And maybe reverse engineer a little bit the public comment period.
And in that drop dead deadline, the mirror image of the process for the board, let's have that front end process for the standing committee. So there's kind of finite example of a drop dead deadline by which an applicant needs to submit materials if they want consideration at the upcoming meeting. And then I think that starts to help everyone anticipate. It's the
It's
workflow.
less of a due date and more of a target date for potential applicants,
Correct.
for them to see the map.
Exactly.
Okay, if we can go forward, I had built in a break, I don't know if we really need
And,
one.
and I want to just for the, and then also when we get these documents, these materials that we're seeing today, up on the board's website or up on the standing committee's website, we can also take comment on these items if the public has any thoughts on a calendar. Any of the things that we've just discussed, we can take that comment and take that into consideration and modify as appropriate.
Is there a standing committee holding spot on the board's website?
We do have the standing committee's page that we can put documents up on, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're not gonna adopt anything, but we've got the process moving along. We're gonna pass by the break. Okay, a few reminders, just top level things. As we discussed, standing committee meetings are public meetings. Because you can't determine today, but it sounds like the suggestion is put some holds on the George Mason University site.
That seems to be our best bet for quorum.
And I don't know if any of the dates you'll want to do this again, which is meet before the board meets. Do you want?
Not if we're doing it up there, obviously I think that, doing it up there or in advance on that cadence we discussed gives us the ability to have a meeting that's gonna be quorumed, have time in between so that the board can get necessary materials. So I think we wanna make sure, but if it cannot be right before the meeting, because that'll defeat the whole
Does that
purpose.
work for
'Cause,
Pam and John?
like, we have an executive session this morning in an hour or two, and so,
Half an hour. Gotta shepherd you all down.
thank you.
John and Pam, does the George Mason University slot work for you all? Is it equidistant?
It is. I think, just for my own clarification purposes, is participating through Zoom or Teams, does that count towards quorum, or do you need to be physically in? Okay.
You missed a 4-hour conversation about that this morning.
No.
I'm sorry, I had two different
Yeah,
Zoom
The
links today.
standing
so-
committee is a committee of the board, and you all have the same obligations, which is you need to have a quorum physically present in the room, but then beyond quorum, people can participate.
Got it. Okay.
virtually. So as long as you meet the tick mark of the quorum, then everybody else can participate virtually.
Okay, I see.
Okay, covered FOIA, meeting dates will be done. Coordinate what happens outside of meeting dates. this is the, you know, if it works, the cadence that you find, that you're looking for, maybe making comments directly onto a Word document and sending them into Lorraine, I think that's gonna take 1 or 2 iterations for you to figure out. And that will continue to be refined, because it's not only what you discuss at the meeting, it's what happens outside the meeting. That's really, that's where a lot of your work is gonna be done, and it has to work for you all, as very busy people. Okay, next one, preview upcoming changes. The lab, the unwieldy named lab school application process document, which will, you know, be newly christened, you know, the lab school application guidelines, will be cleaned up and be presented. You'll see those. Jen, I can send you, and Pam and John, the board members got it as a part of their board book, but I will make sure that you all get a copy of the red line changes that are anticipated. It looks like it's a lot. It isn't really. They're cleaning up things, like at some point it makes it sound like the applicant is different than the eligible entity. They're just a bunch of cleanup that needs to happen. Like when the public comment happens is in the wrong place. And I think it'll just be streamlined. If I had to write and create the document all over again, I would make a completely different document, but I don't wanna, you know, I don't wanna push the committee or the board too hard right now. So we're just gonna make it better. And then as soon as I get a nod tomorrow from the full board that the process document, yes, please do clean that up. Then we will do the commensurate compendium changes to the lab school application itself. It will help us far better. You know, we've gone through this process as a department of needing to like synthesize large amounts of data. Like, where's the lab school gonna be? What's the name of the lab school? Who are the partners? Who are the divisions? How many students do they anticipate? When do they anticipate? Like, all of those are like data points that aren't really represented very well in the application process, and it's hard for us to like, you know, suss out. And so we're trying to, you know, everything we're doing is trying to make this process a little bit better. Okay, next steps. Have you all thought about or discussed at all, like having a chairman or chairman and vice chairman or a grand poobah?
Yeah,
Standing committee
yeah, I mean, obviously, again, this is,
for discussion.
yeah, this is a discussion meeting, it's not a quorum, so I'm not making a motion I want to make sure that's clear for anybody watching this now or later. But I do think something we should consider. Joan Wodiska brings a lot of experience to the board around this work, both as just as you heard this morning in our last meeting, just on sort of good process and how to do this in a way that, you know, has integrity and public confidence. Also, you know, domain expertise. I think would be fantastic to chair this committee going forward. And if we had a quorum, that is a motion I would have wanted to offer for this committee. I don't know others.
Second that if we got a quorum.
If we were seconding
Yeah,
things.
if we were seconding-
Technically seconding my hypothetical, yeah. No, but I think
Ready to
like
go.
the good thing is we have a little time so we can discuss it and so forth, but I wanted to, you know, put my cards on the table about the direction I think we should go and why.
Well, and that helps formulate the successive agenda that you will next time have 7 days before you meet. Is, you know, you can entertain.
I would, hi, everybody. I would definitely support that motion at the next meeting. I think that Joan does have all of the qualifications that you just laid out. And if she was willing to consider it, I think we'd all be thrilled.
We have-
Yeah, if we had quorum, I think it would be unanimous if we had quorum. So, yeah.
Is there a possibility to do things by consent agenda or?
Well, I think the committee's kind of already decided that, you know, Joan's going to be facilitating a couple things. She's volunteered at this point.
Yeah.
Nothing's
So I
been
think
decided.
it's a natural thing at the next meeting.
Yeah, so it'll be formalized at the next meeting.
Yeah, we can, you know, do that in a meeting where we have a quorum and, all of that.
So we will add a consent agenda item to your
We
next
haven't given Joan its,
agenda.
to make her Sherman-esque statement.
I am happy to be of assistance. If anyone else wants to serve in that capacity, by all means, I'm happy to not do it equally as well as I indicated to Andy. But I'm happy to assist everyone and want to make sure that we have we help provide support for the board and run a clean process.
Well, the committee might also want to consider a second
Yep.
offering, sacrificial offering,
Yes.
to help Joan, just in the event that you can't make a meeting, we have someone else to facilitate. So, if there is another volunteer out there.
That would be great, because I think, if I kind of put on my former state board hat, I think, it really works well when we work as a team, because we have someone else to bounce ideas off of, to help facilitate, hey, what should be on the agenda, hey, what's coming up, if, and would you want if there was, just as, was indicated in the prior meeting, if there was feedback that might be wanted to be provided to an applicant, whom would be the appropriate person to do that? Do we want staff to do that, or do we want a member of the board or someone in leadership? So these are kind of things that we'll sort out as we're all figuring this out. But if anyone would like to co-ride with me, I would be delighted to have your assistance. I see crickets.
I think this conversations
But,
are on your
yeah,
immediate.
I'll chat with everybody after this discussion further. Sort out who may have the time to do this, which I know sometimes for the board members who serve, this is already triple and
Mhm.
sometimes quadruple duty for you all.
Right. And the hope is that the chair will have a very good working relationship with Lorraine, and Lorraine can help, you all can develop your own internal cadence, if you will. So let's just talk for a moment, because the committee, got off to a start with its orientation and meeting with the IHEs, JMU, James Madison University, and Southside Virginia Community College. I do think, because of the time lag between when they applied and when we got to where we are now, that my strong suggestion is that you find a way to do this evaluation for the March meeting. Mostly because they're ready to go this fall, and the more runway we give potential applicants, particularly with the existing barriers, which we're gonna reduce, amongst the barriers that, and things that I'm cleaning up in the process document, an artificial deadline that you had to apply a year in advance. Nobody knows where that came from or why it's there. 9 months in advance this and 6 months in advance that. We can't go back in time to figure out why those were there, and nobody can make a good case for why those should be there. So we are gonna reduce those, but there has been a request that, if, whatever lead time you can give them, they could use. So the ability exists for us to immediately put up public comment and keep it open as long as you want. But finding that internal process for you all to follow, I think is part of a discussion we need to have.
And its most immediate next step, it would appear that we should at least put their 2 applications up on, say, the committee's website, ask for public comments, have the benefit of getting that information, and then we can, at the March meeting, if we're kind of following order, be able to deliberate on that item. I would appreciate it if staff could advise us on a mechanism for each of the members here to give input on these applications. And I think everyone had a couple more questions for each of these applicants that we haven't had an opportunity to have answered yet. Certainly, I think we should also have a conversation briefly about the role of the committee. I know we have kind of to act as review these items and see if it fits within the rubric, and then advise the state board. We don't make a yes or no, we merely advise. I do think there are instances for applicants where a refinement, an improvement, or an amendment to their application may enhance our advice and counsel. That was, so, you know, I think we just all need to think about that a little bit, but at the very next step, it is, let's get these applications up on our website, let's ask for public comment, and then we can take that in and then start moving through this document too, which is your process and rubric.
So in setting expectations,
Yeah.
you know, I try to anticipate questions and next steps. So, you know, I'm looking a little bit over the horizon. And I've advised the two IHGs exactly that.
Perfect.
That the reason I gave them the schedule that was given to you is, here's the window in which it is highly likely and reasonable to expect incoming questions from this committee. And the incoming questions can be anything you want, which is, you know, in the governance or the target student population or whatever. You know, please submit a letter, or submit a, you know, an amendment, you know, identifying these topics. You can ask them whatever you want. And so if you have a suite of questions, they're primed. As I would say, this would be the similar process to anything which would follow, which is you get something in, you got a series of questions, you collate, you know, the respective members' questions, eliminating any duplicates, you know, use Lorraine and board office, and off an inquiry goes. And that's, they're in the cycle for receiving and responding to questions in preparation of the March board meeting. So, yeah. That's good.
Bravo.
What else? So I'm at my.
Do committee members have a thought, opinion on if questions are gathered from all members, the staff will gather those, they'll go back to the university or the applicant. The applicant can answer back in writing. Or do you want it to be a conversation? Or some hybrid of the two? And here's the reason I'm asking. Is do you want me to kind of give some context on this?
Well, no, keep
Or,
going.
yeah,
Please keep going. I was just thinking, like, context of doing this and making sure we have public means, public visibility is a little complicated, that's all.
Yeah, so there's times I'm thinking about when we would go through school accreditation. Here's the example in my head, that sometimes you want to just be able to, you know, you can have it in a public conversation, or you can have a meeting where you sit down, let's say, with the applicant and say, hey, here's some questions I have about your application. Here's some like minor changes that you might be advised to make, or, you know, it's your choice, but let's just have that conversation. Where it's being done as a collaborative, it's being done as a partner, right? So sometimes sometimes it can be really burdensome for, let's say we asked one of the applicants questions and they have to respond back in writing. That can be an administrative burden in and of itself to respond in writing, or sometimes in the translation of back and forth in documentation, something really gets lost about, say, what was really the intent of my question? I think in an ideal circumstance, we would have an applicant apply. We would get public comment on that application. The applicant would come before this body. We would ask them questions, have that deliberation real time, and be done. And if there were refinements necessary, the applicant would refine, resubmit an amendment, and that process would go as far along as the applicant or the committee needed. Ideally, be very short, you know.
I anticipate that in 6 months,
Yeah.
that's exactly how it's gonna work.
Right. And, okay.
And I think what you're right now doing is you're noodling through how you know, that first rocket launch
Correct.
is, and everybody's a little bit nervous because they haven't seen the rocket launch before. So.
Such a great example considering the rocket lab. Yay, Virginia's loves launches.
Yes,
like
loves
last
Wallops
week.
Island. So yes, I anticipate that by the time you meet an IHE, you will have had a little bit more, you're a little more long in the tooth with this process. But because as a public body, open meetings law is 2 or more. There's nothing that prohibits one of you from having a conversation with an IHE with Lorraine to document, questions. So incoming questions could be collated, the board office can provide the support, and I don't know, somebody could pick up the phone and have a Zoom call with them asking clarity on particular things and noting it for the board, or the board's committee, sorry.
How do others feel about what Elizabeth just stated? Is that comfortable for everybody? Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I want to be sure that we take into account is that process is so critical in this, because if we are having questions, I know that it was just brought up, and I think, Joan, you brought up the idea that there could be some refinement or even some slight revision of an application. I think that needs to be part of the process that would be very explicit as to when that would happen. Would it be before or after a meeting? If revisions were going to be made, how would that become part of sort of the public understanding of what might be changing about an application? I think that this is a really critical conversation, because there should be one person probably designated to speak with an applicant on behalf of this group, so that all of the questions are being known to the whole group that are moving to the applicant. I don't know if I'm making sense from this virtually, but just trying to be sure that we get that lined up very clearly for an applicant to know, are they going to be expected to potentially have to do some revisions before a final decision? Or would we have that meeting and then give them direction to make a shift before we would take that application forward based on our consensus that there needed to be some change?
Pam, that's incredibly clear. Here, I just want to restate. So you're really advising on, also, we have to ensure there's a fair process for the applicants, that the rules are the same regardless of where you are in the process or regardless of where you apply. So
I can give you an example because I run the Funding Evaluation Review Committee, which is the department's committee that reviews and awards the planning grants. So we're reviewing them and going through the planning grants. We have 3 internal reviewers and 3 external reviewers. I rotate. We decided as a body that we would rotate in 3-member panels. So all 6 of us don't review every planning grant, but we're on a rotation. And we allow, look, if there's something that comes up in that review, we don't want to, the whole goal is for people to be successful at this. We want IHEs, we want eligible entities to be successful. We want lab schools to serve not only students and academic excellence and opportunity and pathways for students, but also for the incubation for the development of teacher pipelines. There's good that comes out of this. So if an organization, a higher ed center or a community college or a 4-year university, if they have something that they can do to make it better, we want to facilitate that. We're not going to be a high bar barrier of entry into becoming a planning grant awardee or a lab school awardee. So as long as you're public that, look, there were things in this application that, we had questions about, we solicited a response from the applicant, and here are their responses, and then you have your report. I think that speaks for itself. I appreciate very much the fact that we want to be public about this, and we do. But what we don't want to do is have an artificial, I think, set of structures that say, well, you didn't apply by the state, so we're not going to entertain you, or we had this question and it wasn't included in the application, so you got to start, go back to square one, start over.
So let me suggest this in the interest of time. I think if we had kind of let's have staff work on putting together a flow document on the consideration of applications. So we've got this rubric which is what we would apply to applicants. But what we need is a flow document of an entry point into this process that's a bit more detailed, because you've appropriately acknowledged that that has to be determined by the committee.
Yeah.
So let's have staff put together a strong document on a flow document that takes into consideration what Pam's noted, that it is a public process, that, you know, we are advising, I think ultimately what's gonna happen is we're gonna hang our hats on this rubric. We're gonna look at this we're gonna have, so the applicant's gonna submit an application. This is how I think it might work. They submit an application. That application goes up for public comments. The public comments, we see that public comment in advance of the meeting. The applicant comes to the meeting. We can ask questions of the applicant at that time. Then this committee would deliberate with the scoring rubric. We would determine their score, or if additional information is needed, that would be noted. And then at that point, it is of the applicant's choice, and this is my view, they can take counsel from this committee, or they don't have to. And we are in an advisory because our score would be our score. And if they want to refine their application to some of the feedback that's been provided, they may choose to do so. Or they may choose that, you know what, really happy with our application, we're comfortable with it going forward to the board. It is as is. And then we can file our report to the board and they will ultimately act. But we're kind of filtering through.
But do you want in that flow,
Yeah.
do you want the ability to consider, so, you know, every question that you have is not going to come to mind or be answered in the meeting where you meet the IHE and you get to ask questions. Things will come up later. Do you want a, if you will, on your flow chart, a dotted line that, you know, if there's questions, we go to the IHE has the opportunity to respond and submit back, and then you complete your report.
And I think that would be my intent, and I would want to hear what other committee members have to say about that, but it would be my intent. But there's always a balance here of, my intention of that would be to have a partnership and a collaboration and see this committee as providing a technical assistance. Because when you think about who's on this committee, some powerhouse expertise that an applicant really might benefit from. The balance there, however, is I also don't want them to get stuck in a Rube Goldberg process where they can't get out of it. They're happy with their application. They don't want to make changes and they just want to go before the board for consideration. So I think it is a mutual process of the committee can have an iterative questions and the applicant can also say, hey, I'm just comfortable as it is. I don't want to make changes. And I think that lends itself to, I think for all of us who've been through a grant review process, there comes a point, just put me before the body. I'm ready to go. I want to get this cracked out. So I think we need to have that. But the intent here is to provide technical assistance support to further enhance. But it is of the choice of the applicant. And then, you know, in a reasonable time frame, maybe it's a one review. So typically the state board before, you know, items would come before the committee, the board maybe once, maybe twice, and then final action. So that's something for, again, everybody to kind of think about. Do you need to see something once? Would you like to see it previewed once, have discussion with the body, do this iterative process, and then at the next meeting?
I'm happy to do a you know, a straw man flow chart for you to try to capture this. I don't think that's easy. I may even be able to have this out to you guys, you know, in short order.
And then everyone can look at it,
Yeah.
the public can look at it. And then if everybody's good on the process, we can start to move forward with, you know, again, your draft document here also being the
Right.
undergird, we're gonna use the rubric.
Right.
We don't get an opinion on how to grade or score. That's been set up by the General Assembly of the board we just have to apply these rubrics and parameters.
All right, any other questions, answers? I want to be mindful of your time.
I do have one.
Q&A.
You're on mute.
Pam, you're on mute.
Sorry, I need my coffee mug up here. The one question I had is, do you see the rubric as more formative feedback to the entity prior to us meeting in that final sort of decision-making mode so that they can use that information?
No.
Is that the process?
No, I really imagine that the rubric is the mechanism by which this, as a deliberative body, informs their recommendation and report to the board. You're just measuring what's already in the application. What we're contemplating is just adding a step that allows that cycle, which I've already pre-configured with the two applicants. Said, expect in the next couple of weeks that there could be answers from this committee, and kindly be poised to be responsive. And what we're just trying to do is more formalize that process on a going forward basis for subsequent applicants.
So the first time we meet with them and we have an opportunity to ask questions is more of them getting formative feedback. The rubric really is a summative assessment of their proposal.
Yes, ma'am.
Said that.
Spoken like an educator. Okay, so we have a draft. We'll work with Megan and crew to look at the George Mason facility and propose that for your future consideration for the next date. And yes.
I think the other kind of a homework for each of us respectively, it will be to look through this working draft calendar and look through this flow document. And then immediately the questions, these focus questions and the rubric, since that will be the document that really guides a yay, nay advisory, it's to spend a little time with that and submit our collective thoughts to staff.
Just to be clear, the rubric framework was based off of previous, was this brand new or was it?
This was completely written to help
This is
you all.
Okay.
This was to help for you all to say, how do we evaluate? Because if you recall, I wrote a rubric for the planning grant guidelines. It's super clear. It's just because of the statutory 31 elements, it's so, it's unwieldy. And so it's, okay, how do I help you figure out how to look for 31 elements? And I just tried to make it as plug and play as possible when you're looking for 31 things that are in 8 buckets.
I'm very sorry, but I have to
Yep.
put these two.
Yes, yes. Okay. Well, we don't even have to officially adjourn. We didn't officially call to order, but it is what it is. Thank you, John and Pam. I hope we get to see you at a successive meeting. I appreciate your being available virtually to participate and provide feedback and look for more information to come.
President.